Welcome to Lancaster Community Television Station, Channel 66. My name is Ethan, and I'm here with Dr. Todd Mealy. Nice to meet you, Todd.
Nice to see you.
Man, you're a very interesting person. I've known since 2001.
That's right.
And you've grown in many areas, and you entered different chapters of your life. Let's start back to the Harrisburg area of your experience at Bishop McDevitt High School.
Okay. All right. So you just want a general,
Yes.
what I remember about going
Yes.
to McDevitt? So I grew up, my family and I grew up across the street from Harrisburg High. I can really be in my upstairs of my home, of our home that I grew up in, and look out and see Harrisburg High School. But one block away was Bishop McDevitt. And my brother and I and sister ended up going to McDevitt. My brother and I were at McDevitt at the same time. My sister entered McDevitt after the two of us graduated. But most of the things I remember from my experience at McDevitt was really playing football. 3 of those years I got to play football with my brother, who's a year older, 18 months in age, but one class older. And we were really fortunate to play on some really good football teams, and had some really good football coaches that ended up influencing both of our lives, so much so where we both decided to get into coaching. And when we were younger, like in our young adult lives, a lot of the decisions that he and I were making had to do with, finding jobs coaching football. The head football coach we had there at McDevitt, his name was Fort Chapman. He's not coaching anymore, but he played at Cumberland Valley. The field at Cumberland Valley is named after his dad. And he knew every little detail about the game. And his assistant coach, who is actually the individual who brought me down to Lancaster, was Scott Feldman when he got the head coaching position at McCaskey. And then, when I was done playing football, he offered me a coaching job at a young age. But again, going back to the Bishop McDevitt experiences, there's something about going to a small school like McDevitt when it comes to pride. I think you didn't go to a small school, but you came to a school that has a lot of pride. There's one thing about McCaskey that sets McCaskey apart from every other school in the county, which is how proud people are, to say that they graduated from McCaskey. That's how a lot of folks, including myself, feel about Bishop McDevitt. The school we went to had, had a nice, like kind of Gothic look to the outside, historic look to the outside of the building, sitting on a hill right there on Market Street in the city of Harrisburg. And it was a very diverse school in terms of the student body. So it was a really good experience in all facets, both academically and athletically.
And I remember you was a linebacker.
That's correct, yeah, I played linebacker. I started 3 seasons there, but my sophomore year, actually my brother started over me at linebacker in the first game of the season. And he was more of an offensive player. And he got the nod because he had a season experience, and I was a young sophomore, and the coaches don't like to play sophomores. I'm one of them, guilty of that today. But my brother didn't perform on the defensive side the first game, and then about halfway into the second game, the coaches put me in, and then I ended up starting every game the remainder of my career there. My junior year, the team went 15-0. And we won the district title and the state championship, the only state championship that Bishop McDevitt has, though they've gone to the state title 4 other times. Our group can say we have the only one.
Cool, that's definitely history-making and a big impact. And it definitely influenced the community of Harrisburg to basically say they have a PIAA state championship.
Right.
And then I remember at one point you was being a football coach at McCaskey and going to Millersville University.
Yeah.
May explain how you balanced both worlds?
Yeah, well, so I didn't choose college to play football. If football was the objective, I probably went to a school like Lycoming, a smaller school that really recruited me hard as a student athlete, but I didn't go that route. I chose Millersville for a few reasons. One, it was cheap. It was a lot cheaper than the school my brother was going to, and I considered that. But also, there was a professor there, a history professor there, that I wanted to take his classes, and I did. And he's actually become my mentor and kind of colleague at the moment now. His name is Matthew Pinsker. Coincidentally, a McCaskey graduate. He graduated from McCaskey, I think, in 86 or 88.
Wow.
But he became my mentor, and at the time he was teaching at Millersville. So I wanted to go to Millersville, for that reason. And I wasn't playing football. And Scott Feldman, who was a defensive coordinator at McDevitt, got the head coaching position at McCaskey, and I was in Lancaster. So he said, "Do you want to coach? We need, I'm trying to fill a coaching staff. I need some ninth grade coaches. I want you as a ninth grade coach." So I actually started coaching football in 1998. So this was my 20th year coaching. And so I coached in 98, and for a few years as the offensive coordinator of the freshman team. So that's really how I got started coaching. I was just fortunate that someone who knew me was in the area and had a job available, I'm fortunate by that circumstance. Not everybody is as lucky.
Yeah, I remember when I was a freshman under your belt, and you was the head football coach. I remember the days of working out in the summer, doing the drills, running those sprints, and of course, running that hot degree weather, 2-a-day practices. Now everything has changed to just 1-a-day practices. And I remember you was a very influential man in my life, just encouraging me to keep going forward. And then one year you got the opportunity to move up to become a defensive coordinator at McCaskey after Matt Ortega was given the opportunity to go to Harrisburg High. He was there for 1 year, and then he went to York, and now he's at Coatesville Heights area senior high with at least 100 wins, the father-son duo down there.
Right. My time at McCaskey was special. Not that the coaching staff that I work with now were very tight. And those who coach with me at Lancaster Catholic now coach with me at Penn Manor. But at McCaskey, that coaching staff was partly Harrisburg. They were guys I grew up with. So I played for Scott Feldman. I grew up with Matt Ortega. I grew up with another assistant coach, Pete Susi, who's now coaching football, but baseball at Downingtown. So there were guys from the Harrisburg area that were at McCaskey, and that made it really special. Plus, we were all younger and single. So where today we all have families and we spend our free time with our families, back then we spent our free time with one another, doing silly things. We'd play tennis early in the morning, or we'd play tennis in between football workouts, basketball. We'd sometimes we'd tackle football. We'd have competitions in the weight room amongst the coaching staff. That was a lot of fun, and it feels like ages ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And the thing about Matt is, he and I were pretty tight, and he ended up having the opportunity to go to Harrisburg and coach for a year under George Chomp, and then he took that opportunity to York, and when I became a head coach at Penn Manor, after serving a couple of years as a defensive coordinator at McCaskey, he was still at York, and he reached out to us and said to me, "Look, you're now at a program that hasn't won many games. I would offer the opportunity to you to really spend some time with us at York. This is Matt talking, and then maybe that would help you guys out." And it did, because we were able to turn a program around at Penn Manor in a year's time. And I think the connections through those I made both at McDevitt, but then also at McCaskey, had a lot to do with the success that we were able to have at Penn Manor and for our first year at Lancaster Catholic.
And I remember this quote that was told to you by the late Steve Powell, aka
Coach
Bird,
Powell.
And he told you at the Bird Nest, I'm just paraphrasing,
Sure.
where he told you when you guys lost a good bit of games your first year, he said, when the ship's not sailing right, it's on you.
Yeah.
I bet you can give a better.
Yeah. So this is it's November 2007, and we had just finished our first season at Penn Manor. You have to consider Penn Manor hadn't had a season better than 5 wins since 1984, and they had just had a 5-win season. And prior to that, they hadn't had a season with more than 3 wins since 1994. There was a lot of losses accumulated in that program, and we took a risk to take over the program. To jump from McCaskey and go to Penn Manor, because I made decisions to get into coaching, I often ask myself today, what if I would have made decisions to go, a different avenue? What would have happened? But and now I was taking a leap to become a head coach at a program that wasn't known for winning, and it wasn't known for the school wasn't known for football. So if things didn't go well at Penn Manor, would I ever get a head coaching job again? And keeping in mind that that's how I kind of made decisions in my life. So it was a big risk, and we finished our first season, went 1-9. Believe it or not, there were some positives in that year. We beat a playoff. Our win came against a playoff team, and then we had other close games that we lost because we turned it over. So we knew we were right on the cusp of turning around. We had really good kids we were coaching that were coming back. That first year we only had 8 seniors. So we're sitting down at the Bird's Nest, and we're actually doing a history event. We had done a history event at McCaskey High School that morning. I brought some Penn Manor students over. And that night, the keynote speaker we brought in was one of the Little Rock 9 students, Terrence Roberts. And we hosted a dinner for him that evening. And Powell and I were sitting together at a table, and we were talking about football. And he said, look, there's only one thing I will say to you, is if your ship is going to go down, it's got to go down your way. You can't let school board members and parents and the athletic director and principals dictate how you're going to run your program and then it fail. So in other words, what he was saying to me was, if you're going to fail, don't let somebody else be the reasons why you failed. Just let it be your own incompetence. Maybe you're not a good head coach, but do it your way. That way if you don't succeed, that's totally on you, and not because you let other people influence what you wanted to do with that program. And that's the advice I give other coaches now.
Yeah, that's true, because in the coaching world now, a head coach is expected to not only be the coach to students, but also be a father figure, a role model, look over grades, and talk to board members, talk to administrations, attend booster club meetings, also oversee the feeder programs.
Sounds like you coach.
I know football a lot, and plus I learned from the outside looking in.
Sure.
That it's not about having talent nowadays. It's about having a game plan, a foundation, and those same principles in football apply to life. Because if you don't learn from your losses and the mistakes and why you lost that game, or take the moment to celebrate your victories, you're not going to live a fruitful life. And what happens sometimes is when we start overlooking little things, they show up in big moments in our lives.
Yeah. So I'm going to say a couple things here. Sports does a lot to teach you folks about life lessons. The mental toughness I have today is namely because of my experience playing football and what I had to go through playing football. But I'm not going to sit here and say to you, football is the only sport that teaches mental toughness. Football is not the only sport that teaches life lessons. Barack Obama became president of the United States. He didn't play football, but he turned out just fine, didn't he?
Yes.
Right. So it's just not football that does it. But I do think sports is a great way, because you have something like, what's the number, 40 million youth athletes out there. And of those 40 million, so they significantly drop off. And by high school, there's about 15 million athletes nationwide at the high school level. And just a % of them go on and play big-time Division I sports, and just a percentage of them go and play professional sports. So what you're getting at is that an individual's investment in sports throughout their lifetime is going to prepare them for whatever profession they go into, which is not going to be sports. Which is why it's key to have a good role model as a coach that's going to teach and repeat over and time and again the emphasis on making good decisions and the emphasis for being responsible when you do make a bad decision, how to manage your time, how to treat people, how to be a team player. So we have good coaches that are able to exude those skills, as we send these young men who developed into professionals, or a professional in a field that is not professional athletics. So and again, I think football is not the only sport that does that. Now, in some of my research, I have looked at sports and war. And in both World War I and World War II, the government, so a combination of both the presidential administrations in both wars, so the Wilson administration, World War II, and the Roosevelt, or World War I and Roosevelt and World War II, and the military, they invested in sports to prepare soldiers for war. So if someone wants to look into this, they'll see how like a football gave soldiers that were kind of privileged, you know, in college, now going to serve in combat, to be able to survive the throes of combat. You know, but it wasn't just football that taught these soldiers those skills. It was all the other sports across.
Yeah, I remember a few players that did go to war. There was a late Barney Ewell, of McCaskey graduate. There was also Jackie Robinson.
Sure. Jackie never saw combat. He got honorably discharged. Jackie Robinson was in Texas, and this is 1943, and it was a segregated state. And he was on a bus, as he had a break, and he was on he went into town, got on a bus, come back to the Army base, and he was in a segregated bus, and he refused to sit in the back of the bus, and he got himself arrested. It won't be that difficult for you to just Google this, and you'll find the proceedings of the trial. But the result was he was discharged from the Army, but he was so honorably.
That's something that was never mentioned in the movies.
Sure, I know.
That's something that's monumental history that's been withheld. Moving forward, how did you build the foundation to turn the program around at Penn Manor High School?
Well, listen, everything that I've done, I have help. So there's nothing I have done that I've done by myself. So in one sense, I had a good group of coaches that were working with me. Chris Maiorino, who worked with me at McCaskey, he came over. We hired Gordiak, who did a student teaching at McCaskey. So we hired him on the staff. Scott Lackey, who doesn't coach with us any longer. The first two still coach with me. Scott Lackey now coaches and lives in Cedar Cliff. He's a head baseball coach there. He coached me at McDevitt. He came over to Penn Manor with us. And then as time went on, we had for a short time some coaches, like Daryl Dane, who coached with us for 2 seasons, a guy named Adam Cobb, who worked in the school district Lancaster. He's coached with us about 4 seasons. Excuse me. And then we've hired a lot of our players. So as we were still at Penn Manor now and accumulated a couple years there, we had players kind of like myself who didn't play in college, but they had the mind for the game. And one of them, Jared Scher, still coaches with us now at Lancaster Catholic, but he became a coach on our staff at Penn Manor. And Mike Trier coached with us for 2 seasons after he was done playing, because he couldn't play in college because of some health issues. And he's now coaching in Marshall, you know, a major Division I school. So we had some really good coaches that were there, and then we found a way as a coaching staff to prove to the kids that we not only knew the game, but we were teachers of the game. You know, so none of us are yet like scream and holler in your face. I mean, you played, you see
Yes.
this. Like we're on the chalkboard with kids. They have notebooks. Like we really teach them, and then we go to places where they see that we're also interested in their lives outside of football. You know,
Yeah.
so we go to their basketball games or wrestling matches or baseball games, or we go to their concert because they're in the band. We go to the spring musical because they're an actor in the spring musical. You know, so we also did those things at Penn Manor, and then finally we found a way to compete at everything. So just the littlest thing.
And I also remember you hired Brandon Way.
Brandon Way, another former player who played for me at McCaskey when I was young. So he played at McCaskey when I was a freshman coach. So I didn't coach him as a varsity coach, and he went straight to varsity. He didn't play freshman ball. But I was at everything varsity was. So we knew each other well. And then when I got hired as a teacher there, I was his teacher. So he took a class with me. And then he came on board at Penn Manor 2012, I believe. And then so he coached with us for 3 seasons, 12, 13, and 14 at Penn Manor, and then he's been with us at Lancaster Catholic.
Yes. And I remember you're now the all-time winningest coach in Penn Manor history, where your coaching staff, the people behind the scenes. But I understand you had to enter a new chapter of your life where you furthered your education for the doctorate degree.
Yes.
And part of your reason for making that transition is because you had to meet a residency requirement. And that's very true because there's bylaws in college institutions where it says you have to be in class because not all classes are always going to be online.
Correct. Several things about that. I knew when I was going to resign that my decision was going to impact a lot of people. You know, when a head coach leaves a place, that decision to step down impacts every assistant coach and their families. Now, at the high school level, all of our jobs, our primary job is not coaching football. But they were either going to be, you know, out of a job or they had to go somewhere else to coach. So that weighed heavily on me, and I gave my coaches a heads up that this was likely going to happen. So I didn't surprise them with it. I also didn't surprise the administration of Penn Manor. I actually gave them a 2-year warning. I told them in 2012 that there was a good chance that 2014 would be my last season because I was heading towards this doctorate program. And then we arrived at 2014, and the time came. So you mentioned the residency. Now, I'm not an online class guy. I want to be in the classroom. I want to engage in conversations. You know, I want to talk about the readings. I want to be with a professor. So I didn't take online courses. And Penn State they have a 1-year residency for all of their doctoral students, which means that you have to be a full-time student for 1 year. So 2 semesters. But the summer and the winter, they don't count as semesters. So either it had to be fall, spring, or spring the following fall. So either way, there was going to be a year I wasn't going to be able to coach. Because to be a full-time student, you have to take at least 9 credits, at least 3 classes or more to be a full-time student. So I was taking classes, 3 nights a week. So that was a burden on my family. You know, my wife had just finished her doctorate program. My wife, Melissa, has her doctorate. So she was finishing. We had our son, and then she graduated, and then I enrolled in my program.
Back to back.
Yeah, just like that. And then on the second year of the program, then we had our daughter. So we were raising a young family and taking 3 classes a night away from Melissa and the kids. That was tough on her. But we were able to manage all of that. But that's, again, getting back to your original question. Because of that residency, it was impossible to coach it anymore.
It definitely required sacrifice. That's something you taught plenty of your student athletes, and also I'm pretty sure your family taught you that you have to sacrifice, and I'm pretty sure the coach that Bishop McDevitt told you have to sacrifice to win these games.
Yes.
And also win in life. And it comes at a cost.
Yeah, well, that's what a sacrifice is. So I see you get a good grasp of that.
Yes.
I resigned in 2014 after that season, and you talk about sacrificing things. I mean, I still work in that building, and I got along with the administration, got along with the students, and the following year, I'm in the hallways and I see kids that are playing football and they're disappointed, I'm not coaching them, So there was a lot of relationships that I lost, including with some parents that were in the school district as well. But there's no doubt in my mind I made a right decision by doing this, because academics are actually more of a priority to me than sports are.
Cool. Speaking of priorities, one of your hobbies that turned into a success story where you became an author of books.
Sure.
And maybe tell me the story about the guy you did a book on a guy who went to Franklin Marshall College.
So I did a book on an event that happened at F&M. There was a lot of people that I wrote about in that, so I'm not sure who specifically you're referring to.
He was an Asian guy who played multiple positions for the football team, where it was a time period where...
Oh, that's not at F&M. He was at Penn State, so that was different. You're thinking of a different book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're thinking of a different book. Now, I started writing in 2005, and that was because of my mentor I talked about, Matt Pinsker, who I had at Millersville, who's now a professor at Dickinson College. He got me involved in a variety of different history projects, and I was like, I want to write something. But when I started writing in the 2000 aughts, I wasn't trained. I wasn't skilled at what I was doing. I was just kind of making things up as I went along. And that's what's, but I like doing it. So that's what gave me the bug to, you know what, I'm going to go and get a doctorate and learn how to do this. So while I was in my doctoral program, I wrote 2 books. I wrote a book and then I wrote a dissertation. That dissertation got turned into a book. So that's the one you asked me about.
Yes.
Okay, so the most recent book I wrote is about a 3-sport athlete that played at Penn State. And he played at Penn State during World War I. His name was Glenn Killinger. And he was football, basketball, and baseball. And at the time, if they gave out All-American honors to basketball and baseball players, he would have been a 3-sport All-American. But instead, he was just a football All-American. But it's not, that book is not solely about his biography in sports. Instead, it's more of a cultural history. So what I did with that project is I used his biography to explain to the reader what was going on in the country during World War I, because he entered Penn State in 1917 when America entered World War I. And then he was still there, and he graduated in February of 1922. But so I used that story to try to explain to the reader what was going on in the country during World War I, and then after the war, and how the war played a major factor in shaping what we call today as celebrities. And back then in the 20s, they were called American heroes. And his story is quintessential to try to explain that. And in fact, in 1921, he was considered the best football player in the country as a college player. Professional football was not a big deal at the time. So whoever is considered the best football player at the college level was considered the best football player in the country. And he was in 1921, so he started to get on the covers of various newspapers alongside Babe Ruth, who was considered America's greatest sports celebrity. Mm-hmm. So here Glenn Killinger is, with Babe Ruth in these cover pieces, and then you have, throughout the 1920s, all these celebrities pop up, and my argument was that wartime transitions of what the media did during the war and how the government used sports to prep people for war, that when the war ended, that's what they wanted. They craved sports, and they made celebrities, out of these athletes. Yeah,
I remember Babe Ruth. His story basically is going from an orphanage to becoming a Hall of Famer in MLB.
Yes, and in fact, a new book was just published on Babe Ruth about 3 months ago. I'm trying to think of the title of it. It'll come to me later when we're done talking.
Yes.
But I encourage folks to check it out. Just look up the Babe Ruth book published in 2019. And the author of the book dives deep into Babe Ruth's background, and he may have been multiracial. And he was welcomed into Black American communities, particularly when he barnstormed as a baseball player for extra money, and he would play against teams in the Negro Leagues. And he was admired by that fan base as well. So the author gets into that story, which is one of those stories that you haven't heard of before. So I think that deserves further attention too.
That wasn't talked about in his movie or mentioned in his Hall of Fame speech at all.
Sure.
That's something that's hidden. But now as you confirmed it and done your research on it, it's now confirmed. Speaking of confirmation, you end up graduating with your doctorate. May you tell us the university you went to, and then how you made your transition back to football?
Okay, all right. So you're asking me talk about transitioning from my doctoral studies to coaching?
Yes.
Okay, all right. When I finished the residency at Penn State, it was the school year 2015-2016. And at the end of the spring of 2016, I received an email from folks at Lancaster Catholic, and I also got a phone call from some of the coaches, including their head coach at the time, Bruce Harbaugh, gave me a call about, are you looking to get back into coaching? We're looking for a defensive coordinator. So I said yes, but we need to figure out my class schedule. I'm not going to be gone 3 nights a week, but my goal is to graduate within 3 years. Because if you talk to people in doctoral studies, there's people I started school with in 2015. It's now 2019. They haven't graduated yet. So it's not easy. Like you enroll in it, you finish the residency, the first full year at least 9 credits each semester. And then you take what's called a candidacy test. So you're actually not considered a doctoral student until you pass the candidacy test. And what that candidacy test is, it's a test on the spot of all the books you read in the fall and the spring. So you had to come in, they gave you questions, you had to answer based on the books. You pass that, then you move on, and now you're a doctoral candidate. And then I spent the next year getting ready for what's called a comprehensive exam. And the comprehensive exam is a 90-hour test. It's a take-home test, but you do it over the course of 90 hours, and it's 6 questions. And so I took off 4 days of work to do that, and I worked endlessly. And I did it during football season. So I would get up in the morning, take my kids to the sitter, come home. I took personal days, worked from 7 to 3, zipped the football practice, came home from practice at 7 o'clock, and then worked until about midnight. And I did that for 4 days, just so I can get that test done. Because my goal was to submit the best answers
possible
that committee has ever received. Okay. And so I did that, passed the comps, and then after that it was writing of the dissertation. And so I took a year to write the dissertation, which includes the dissertation proposal has to be passed, then you have to defend the dissertation. Oh, by the way, you have to defend your comprehensive exam too, so that's just not a written test.
Whoa.
Then if you go back in, you have to defend your answers a couple weeks later. So all that happened during football season. And then I'd do the dissertation stuff the following year. And then so I defended my dissertation February last year, so February 2018. I defended, and then I graduated. I walked in May. All right, now, so having said all that, I was able to be an assistant coach. So I agreed to go on the coaching staff at Lancaster Catholic to be the defensive coordinator and nothing else, because I just couldn't juggle it all. School was a priority, right? I got out.
Number one.
Yeah, well, I got out of coaching to do that.
Yeah.
And so there were times I missed practice as a D coordinator because I had to go to class or I had to do some obligation in my doctoral program. Not many. I mean, maybe like 3 practices I missed in 2 years as a DC. And ahead of time we arranged things, you know. But as we headed into my second season as DC, then at Catholic, Bruce Harbach told me he was retiring. And with that came a conversation with the administration there that said, we'd like you to replace Bruce. So that's how the transition came from DC to head coach. And then we just finished our first fall running the program.
Yeah, undefeated regular season, qualified for district playoffs.
Yeah.
And then my final question as we get ready to close is, how are you able to balance out football, being a husband, a father, and being a teacher?
Okay, 2 things. One, I have a process of how I manage time. Like I've cut a lot of, you may talk about sacrifices a couple minutes ago. I sacrificed a lot of things from my life. I don't really do much, I don't have much of a social life. I don't watch much on TV, or I don't watch much on Netflix, so there's not much television I watch. The only sports I watch is North Carolina basketball. I don't watch NFL, I hardly watch college football, and I don't watch professional basketball. I did when LeBron was with the Cavs, but now the Lakers play at 10:30. So I don't watch professional basketball. So I don't watch things on television. So I've cut all those things out of my life. So that's, and I have a system at home, a routine of spending time with family, putting the kids to bed, and then I work. And now my wife lets me put one kid to bed and then work while another kid's still awake. So that's one way, just managing time. And then the other is the people in my life that are very helpful. So my wife, Melissa, is wonderful, because I'm gone more than she's gone. And this spring I adjunct, so I teach at Dickinson 2 nights a week. So now I'm gone even more. You know, so my week this spring is teach at Penn Manor, then go to football on Monday. Teach at Penn Manor, then go to Dickinson Tuesday night. Teach at Penn Manor on Wednesday, then go to football. Teach at Penn Manor, then go to Dickinson on Thursday night. And then Fridays just teach at Penn Manor and then go home. And then weekend I'm all family. So, but the stress has been even greater on her this spring. But she's very helpful. Her father, who lives locally, you know, Rich Frericks, my father-in-law, he often comes over. and helps out with the kids. My parents are great. And then, so that's how I manage the family. And then with coaching, it's the coaching staff. The coaching staff that's been together, Chris Meyerino and I have been together since 2004. Everybody else, we've been together since 2007. So we've been together a long time. And none of us have an ego. And we're able to work well together and critique one another. But because of that, we're able to manage the program in a way where at least we had some success last year. So it's a lot of the help that I have.
Yes, definitely. And do you have any upcoming book projects?
Yeah, I actually do. I have two in the pipeline. I just signed a book contract to co-author a Holocaust book with a Holocaust survivor, Linda Schwab. So we just signed a contract. We don't have a publishing date, but I would assume it takes about a year to get a book out once you sign a contract. So I'm going to say sometime around this time next year in 2020. And I just wrote a book, and I'm shopping for a publisher now. I sent out a couple book proposals to a few publishers, but the book is about critical race studies in public education, predominantly in high school age students. So I'm writing a story about why it's valuable that high school age students, but really white high school age students, be educated in critical race studies, or in other words, multiculturalism.
Cool. Well, this is Lancaster Community Television Station. I'm here with Dr. Todd Mealy. My name's Ethan. I'd like to thank you very much for your time and hearing what we have to say. Thanks very, very much for your time, Todd.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah.